really never was interested in animation. I didn't think I was going to be in animation. When I was going to college, I wanted to be an actress. And so that's what I studied. I studied theater and I started auditioning out of college and was waiting tables and kind of came to an epiphany that I didn't really have the drive that was necessary to be a successful working actor. And so then I started thinking about what was it that I liked about acting? What could I take from that and use in a different career potentially? And I probably had about 6 or 7 other careers before I landed in casting. And I got a job at Disney Animation in casting, and it was supposed to be just like a 6-month gig. And I was a casting associate, and I worked with Ruth Lambert at the time. She was the casting director.
Okay.
And we were working on Hercules and Mulan. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the people, and I loved the company, of course, and what Disney makes, and their intellectual property.
Yeah.
And my job was kind of coming to an end, and I was told that there were a couple of available positions in production management, and one was to be, they called them at the time, assistant production managers. I was an APM. That's what they called them, of the cleanup department. And did I want that job? And honestly, Stephanie, it was a lot easier, I think, back then to get a job in animation than it is now.
Welcome to NOUVA Podcast, a show where we delve into the business, marketing, 3D technologies, and original global content. Today, we have a special guest. She has been working for Disney for over 26 years. I mean, Liane, that's a very long time. Netflix for 2 years, and now she's an associate producer at Paramount Animation. But, well, first of all, Liane, thank you so much to be on the show today.
It's my pleasure.
How do you get started in the production industry? What were the early influencers or mentors that shaped your career?
Wow. Well, I'll start from the very beginning. I really never was interested in animation. I didn't think I was going to be in animation. When I was going to college, I wanted to be an actress. And so that's what I studied. I studied theater, and I started auditioning out of college and was waiting tables and kind of came to an epiphany that I didn't really have the drive that was necessary to be a successful working actor. And so then I started thinking about what was it that I liked about acting? What could I take from that and use in a different career potentially? And I probably had about 6 or 7 other careers before I landed in casting. And I got a job at Disney Animation in casting, and it was supposed to be just like a 6-month gig. And I was a casting associate, and I worked with Ruth Lambert at the time. She was the casting director. And we were working on Hercules and Mulan. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the people, and I loved the company, of course, and what Disney makes, and their intellectual property. Yeah. And my job was kind of coming to an end, and I was told that there were a couple of available positions in production management, and one was to be, they called them at the time, assistant assistant production managers. I was an APM. That's what they call them, of the cleanup department. And did I want that job? And honestly, Stephanie, it was a lot easier, I think, back then to get a job in animation than it is now, because I had no experience whatsoever. I, was working as their casting associate. And so I took the job because I felt like, well, artists, actors, I mean, they're very similar. It couldn't be that hard. It was that hard. And so I spent a lot of evenings lying on the floor of my office, having nervous breakdown, trying to figure out. It was a big movie and there was a lot to learn. And I will say I sort of faked it until I made it. We got through it. Cleanup is a very challenging department. It was, I believe, the largest department at the time. We had, my gosh, over 100 artists. We were working with Florida and London and France, as well as Los Angeles. And so it was a lot to do with 2 production assistants, but I got through it. And after that, I worked on Dinosaur, which was Disney's first CG animated film with live action backgrounds. And I was the Sweatbox APM. And Sweatbox, I don't know if many people know what that means, but it comes from long ago when Walt Disney used to review the animation at certain points in the pipeline with his director and producer and all the creative heads of departments. They would cram into this very small room, and I guess it was sweaty in there, and they called it the sweat box. And so thankfully, when I did it, it was a larger room and no one was really sweating, but
and smelly as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it was smelly. But I did that department, which is kind of responsible for meeting with these heads of departments, et cetera, taking really good notes, looking at the film at different points, giving notes to the departments that are coming up. And sometimes you would move the footage backwards. And so making sure that everything moved where it was supposed to go with the right notes to the right people. So I did that. And at the end of that movie, I worked on Home on the Range, which was the very last fully 2D animated film done out of Disney feature animation completely. And at the end of that film, a decision was made to not do 2D animation ever again, to just do CG animation. So it was a very difficult moment in time for many artists who, were they were animators. They drew with pencils on paper. Cleanup artists drew on paper, and technology was changing, and Home on the Range didn't do so well, and there were different leaders at the company at that time, and they made this decision. So a lot of the animation desks were sold off, like literally, and artists were trying to train to work in CG. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Some retired, some got other careers, and I, at that time, left Disney and I went to DreamWorks, and I was actually at DreamWorks for about 9 months. I worked on an animated television show called Father of the Pride. It was on NBC, and it was about Siegfried and Roy and their tigers. And that was, believe it or not, the first animated CG animated series that DreamWorks had ever done that they had outsourced. So we were doing some of the production in-house, but sending out to a vendor studio most of the rest of the production. So animation production through delivery. So it was also a challenging production. It was, since it was about Siegfried and Roy, it happened during the time that Roy was attacked by his tiger, unfortunately, and Manticore. And thankfully he survived, but it was a very scary time for everyone. We were, of course, worried about him. We were worried about the show, if we were going to continue, and we did. But unfortunately, it was canceled. So I moved back to Disney, where I stayed for a long time. I worked in what was called the Creative Legacy Department then. So I wasn't working directly on the films, but my very, very small but mighty department did almost like everything else except for like television series. So we would do shorts. We did, when I first started, it was a lot of 2D animation, and then we moved into mainly CG animation.
Okay.
But we worked with the parks quite a lot. We did marketing, we did commercials, we did some educational DVDs. We did stage shows and Dancing with the Stars and projection shows for the parks, and ended up working partnering with Imagineering, Walt Disney Imagineering, on some of the attractions in the park, the Frozen attraction. And there have been a few things that have come out more recently, Beauty and the Beast in Tokyo, and they had a Zootopia attraction that came out in Shanghai, and a Seven Dwarf Mine Coaster ride. Anyway, it was super fun.
So fun.
And I also got to work on a few shorts with Eric Goldberg, who is an incredible animator. He was the lead animator on The Genie. He was co-director on Pocahontas. And so I co-produced 3 Goofy shorts that are up on Disney Plus. This was during COVID, so it was incredibly challenging, but we had a lot of artists, 2D artists, kind of who were not working, and we wanted them to be creatively engaged. And so we came up with this idea to do these very short shorts. And thankfully, Jen Lee, who's the chief creative officer, and Clark Spencer, who's the president of Disney Animation, both liked the idea. And so we made them. And then Netflix came knocking at my door.
Yeah, it was a long time, Liane. 26 years in Disney, like a home, perhaps like a home for you.
It did feel like home, and it still feels like home to me. Even though I'm not working there anymore, I still have a lot of love for Disney, for what they do, what they make, their artistry. It's really, there's no other company that, can even come close, I think.
Totally. That's true.
Yeah. And I mean, that includes Pixar, of course, because Disney owns Pixar, and Pixar's spectacular. But yeah, so after that, when I went to Netflix, I worked in a department that was created called Creative and Production Solutions, CAPS, the CAPS team. And it was created because when I first started at Netflix, they were planning on putting out quite a lot of content. A lot of feature films, a lot of television shows. They were thinking about potentially building a vertical studio, doing their animation in-house. And things changed very quickly there. They decided to make less. They decided to acquire another animation studio instead of building their own. And so as the amount of content got reduced, leadership changed a few times while I was there. And unfortunately, what my team was hired to do, there really wasn't much of it anymore. And this industry has really changed over, I think, the past maybe 3 years or so. Where a lot of people who had like lifelong jobs at these animation studios are unfortunately facing layoffs. It's the bottom line. It's not about talent, most of the time, or performance. It's really a lot about, money, making your
Mm.
stockholders happy. And so unfortunately I was impacted at the end of last year, and I was unemployed for a while. I was interviewing a lot. It felt very odd and uncomfortable for me, who, I'd had a job for so long and really
Mm.
just went from one thing to another. And I was lucky enough to get this job at Paramount Animation, where I am now. And I'm associate producing on a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles unannounced project.
That's beautiful, Liane. I know that many artists right now they feel like you. Sometimes it's life. It has a different course for everybody, and life really changed a lot after the COVID. So
Yeah.
I know the industry it's has a lot of collapsing from this side and other collapsing from the other side. But I know that it might hopefully in some point it can be some balance. I hope that's the thing, having just hope for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that having worked in animation for so many years now, it definitely is cyclical. We have our hiring frenzies and then just, difficult moments in time. I wouldn't let this discourage anyone who's looking to get into this industry. There's a lot more opportunity than there was when I started. There were a lot fewer studios. Now there are so many animation studios, and there's also the gaming industry, and that animation has come such a long way, since when I started in animation. Now the stuff that I'm seeing is just pretty incredible. There's definitely a lot of talent there.
Yeah.
And so I think that while there are a lot of opportunities, it feels like you have to be prepared, always prepared to be, potentially looking for another job.
Yeah.
There's just no guarantees anymore. And so I think, if I were to give advice to anyone looking to get into the industry, I would say definitely go for it, but just be ready, have your resume ready, make contacts, be involved with, any kind of, I'm in WIA. I did a mentor circle, a few months ago. I finished it up over the summer, and make friends. And, and that way, hopefully, if you find yourself in the position that I found myself in, you'll have enough irons in the fire and you'll be poised and ready to go. And it won't be like, oh no, now I have to put my resume together. I've had this job for 20 years and I don't even know where to begin. And to get like up on LinkedIn and make sure all of that is like set up. And that's how you found me, was on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you for accepting the invitation. Okay, Liane, I have a question. You mentioned you have been from a traditional, very, very traditional way to do films and to project the films on the big screens. So, what are the unique challenges and opportunities as well? Does animation for streaming platforms compare to the traditional television or film nowadays?
I mean, I think that with streaming, Netflix has been very successful financially with that platform. They have an algorithm that helps tell them how many eyes are on something so that they can figure out, like, via how many subscribers they have, if they're making money on this project, if they're not making money on it. What's good about putting together a project for streaming is that you can finish it. You have to still finish it on schedule, because
Yeah.
the longer you go with something, the more expensive it is, but you don't have to necessarily release it right away. You can hold on to something and be more strategic with where you're releasing it and when you're releasing it. That's definitely an advantage with streaming. I think technology is like really on its way, with different ways of producing animation. Using Unreal Engine is a big one. I think that some studios are already using it for certain things. I don't know, and in gaming studios, they certainly do, real-time rendering and all of that. It's funny because I came from like traditional 2D hand-drawn, scan each piece of paper one by one. And now it's, the technology is just insane. And things are really moving along. I think, as somebody getting into the industry, the more you know, the better. The more you read, the more you just delve into the knowledge pool, so that you can be, so that people will want to have you on their team, right?
Right.
But yeah, as far as like advantages, I would say that's
Yeah.
one of the advantages of streaming over releasing in a theater. But when you release something in a theater, you really know how much money you're making, right? Like, how many ticket sales you've had. And that's how you can figure out, like, we've sold $200 million worth of tickets. And so you can balance that against what your budget was. And then there's consumer products, and there's like all the spinoffs that come with a film. Like for Disney, they have theme parks, so they can, get more attendance by like taking a new Disney princess from Frozen. Oh, here's Frozen. Oh my gosh, what a cash cow that film is. And everything that comes along with it, costumes and music and toys and books, and it goes on and on, right?
That's true. And what are some strategies that you can share with us for managing vendors relationships and negotiating contracts? If you can give us a little bit of tips, like on the tip of the iceberg. I know you can't do it very deep, but at least some tips for that.
Yeah, I think it's important to have to appreciate your vendor studios and to understand that they are artists as well, right? And they're very talented artists. And so it's knowing who you're working with, what their strengths are, and also understanding what their weaknesses are. Every vendor studio is different. Some have an incredible roster of artists, but their production staff may not be that on the ball. The reports that you get might not be what you're expecting to see, or something like that, and some are the opposite, and some have both. And, so it's really about doing your homework. If you've never worked with a vendor before, trying to spend some time with them, get to know them, physically in the same space, if possible, for periods of time, do visits. Be kind, communicate well and often. That's really important, I think.
Said, okay, I have to go to a festival or to somewhere so I can sell the IP if they like it. So they are like concerned of what are the steps after the contracts with the perhaps potential buyers, if there are royalties, if there are not royalties, or at least how they can remunerate from the series if they're going to make a series or a film.
So you're asking what comes after someone has sold something, because it's interesting. A lot of times people reach out to me and say, I have this great idea for a movie, or I've done a short and I'm trying to sell it, or can you look at this for me, or can you do this? I think an important thing for people to understand is that we can't take any unsolicited material at all. We could get in big trouble. I mean, I'm sure everyone has heard about studios being sued because people are saying they stole my idea, right? So please don't reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, I've got an original song or I've got an idea for a movie, because I can't listen and I can't read it. But after something has been sold, honestly, I think the most important thing is to have a good agent, someone who will negotiate for you, any royalties or, whatever else you can get from it. I mean, for someone very new, I would say that it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be getting all of that, back end and things like that. You probably would just get paid for your project. And if you can stay connected to it while it's being made, that's amazing. But a lot of times that doesn't even happen. You just sell an idea and you're out. And then your idea or your script goes to a studio and they can do whatever they want to it. They can make it, they cannot make it. They can change it so much that you don't even recognize it. Yeah. All of that happens. And so when you're new in the business, you don't really have a lot of, like there's nothing to back you up, right? You're not Guillermo del Toro, you're John Smith, right? So no one's heard of you, and really they're giving you your big break is what they're looking at it as. So it's hard, but if you have a good agent, you might be able to squeeze something out of the deal, hopefully.
And what do you see yourself or the next thing for you next year? What are you planning, your personal project, something personal for you?
I definitely want to do more mentoring. I loved doing the WIA mentor circle. My husband is a writer. Oh. And we're talking about maybe partnering on some things. So we'll see what happens with that. It's kind of fun to look at, creating something after being in production, because typically we're not like the creatives, we manage budgets and schedules and resources, and it's not the sexiest thing. But I'd like to think of myself as a creative person. And so I'm excited about that.